Hey everyone, welcome back to In Her Wallet podcast, a weekly show helping women around the world take control of their finances for good and build better financial futures one episode at a time. My name is Sofiia. I'm your host, creator behind In Her Wallet, and an accredited investment representative here in Canada. This week, we are releasing the final episode of season 2, in which I wanted to compile all the best takeaways from 46 episodes we aired in this season thus far. I honestly can't believe that I created and released new episodes for 46 consecutive weeks, even with everything that has happened this year. Moving to a new home, renovating it, all the travel, Roman proposing to me, and lately my parents coming to Canada, building a business, of course. None of it ever stopped me from creating content on personal finance and investing for you guys. I'm truly proud of this season, and I'm so thankful to you for allowing me to be a part of your day whenever you listen to In Her Wallet podcast. In season 2, I was joined by 25 guest experts, investment advisors, lawyers, insurance professionals, startup founders, financial planners, accountants, authors, and personal development coaches. Each one of them shared advice that comes from years of industry and personal experience. When I went to re-listen to each of these episodes, I realized that they sound like I'm just eardropping on someone's conversation. And I think the reason for that is because for me, I don't lead these conversations as a regular interviewer. I truly admire them, and I ask them questions that I would ask if we were sitting at a coffee shop, having coffee and just talking one-on-one. And I truly look at them as my peers that I can learn from. And I hope that with you listening to In Her Wallet podcast, you feel the same way as well. And so the goal of today's episode is to really bring together all the best takeaways from season 2 to let you get a glimpse into what it was all about. And if you like any episodes in particular, they are all linked in the episode description, and you can go and listen to them individually as well. Before we get into talking about these episodes, there is one thing I want to ask you as always. If you feel like you get any value from listening to In Her Wallet podcast, I would so appreciate if you took the time to leave us a 5-star rating and a review. You can do that on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. On Apple Podcasts app, you simply scroll all the way down to write a review section. In the rating section, if you feel like we've earned it, you leave me 5 stars, and you can also leave me a written review. Honestly, it can be long or short. It can be anything from how today's episode resonated with you to the guests you want to see and the topics you want me to explore in the future. All of this just helps me show up as a better host for you and helps our show grow. With that, let's dive into the episode. All in all, I can define 3 major topics that were discussed in season 2. It's the career and business related episodes, the action-driven episodes on building your wealth through things like investing, and finally, the financial well-being. And so I want to start with the latter because for me, our financial health starts with our head. It starts with our thoughts, with our feelings. If you've never thought about your relationship with money, our episode with Leisse Wilcox, a 2-time best-selling author, called How Emotional Intelligence Defines Our Relationship with Money, helps tackle just that. Here's a clip.
It's easier than we think, but it feels really scary at first because, as you know, nobody wants to talk about money. I mean, we're outliers, and your show is an outlier, and your guests are all outliers, and your listeners are also outliers. So that's not a great example to use in this moment. However, really the stats tell us that it's only like 1 in 3 women is actually comfortable talking about money, which means 2/3 of women are not. And for that 2/3 of women, like money is as taboo as talking about sex or like your favorite positions in bed. Like it's so confronting. So that is a real fear for a lot of people. So the first thing I always say is like, your feelings are valid here and your emotional response is valid. So if it feels intimidating, let yourself feel intimidated. And then also like invite yourself to take that courageous step of having a look. Like, what is this feeling that comes up around money? Where do I feel it in my body? And how does it make me feel? I have a friend who's another business owner, and she's really, really good at what she does, but she has a hard time making money at it, not because her sales are bad. Her sales are like through the roof, but because she feels a tremendous amount of guilt anytime she charges a client anything more than like $100 an hour. And so, we have to, it's hard and it feels scary, but we have to be able to have that honest conversation with ourselves. Like, all right, so when I think of money, I feel guilt, I feel fear. A lot of people feel shame or disgust. It's inviting yourself to have that like first courageous step to just be willing and able to look at your relationship with money. I also love personifying it. So if you just start to describe money as your boyfriend, like, how would you describe that relationship to money? Is it loving, controlling? Is it fearful? Is it like almost ambivalent? Or is it nurturing and we want to spend time together and we want to get to know each other and we're invested in the relationship? Most people have some kind of an avoidant or highly insecure relationship with their money.
I really like how Lacey says, try to personify your relationship with money. If it was your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your best friend, what qualities would they have? And so if this year was, let's say, a record-breaking income year for you, or you've been able to incorporate a good, healthy money habit, I'm extremely proud of you. I'm extremely proud of you for nurturing that relationship with your money. But if you're someone who feels overwhelmed about your money, if you feel like you're behind on your finances, if you postpone looking at your bank statements again and again, the next clip from our episode, How to Balance Your Money and Mental Wellbeing with Janine Rogan, chartered professional accountant, public speaker, and the author of the Pink Textbook, is for you. Here it is.
Yeah, I think the first thing I always tell people is to know that they're not alone. There are other people in this situation, and that it's not just you against the world. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to tell anybody if you're not comfortable with that. That's a choice that you get to make. But I think the next step is you only have to do one thing at a time. Personal finance is overwhelming in the sense that it uses a lot of financial jargon. There's so much to know. There's books and courses and textbooks, and you don't have to know it all right now. All you have to do is one thing. And if that one thing is opening a bill, that's a step in the right direction. And then I would say kind of after getting past that initial overwhelm and maybe addressing some of that shame, your money does not define you. Your net worth does not equal your self-worth. And knowing that money is just a tool that we use, and everybody has a different amount of that tool to allocate, and we just have to do the best we can with what we have. And I think that, remembering that is really grounding and important. And then I would say the last thing is if you're someone who likes to avoid these things, scheduling once every 2 weeks, half an hour of set aside time for your money when you're at a state that is calm. So maybe it's like Friday mornings, you're not like stressed out, and maybe you light a candle and put on some nice music and make a little ritual out of it. I think that can also be a positive way to interact with money if you've had a lot of negative experiences or you're feeling a lot of stress around your money.
What stood out to me in this episode with Janine was that she said 50% of employees experience feelings of stress and anxiety when it comes to money. That's half of the people half of the people in the world. And so if you're someone who isn't happy with your financial situation, who lacks confidence, who might have past trauma with regards to finances, there is a high chance you might feel stuck in your current environment, such as the job that you might not like. And so that is exactly what we talked about with Arunie Saldhi, a registered provisional psychologist, in the episodes about early signs of burnout at work and how to recover from it. Listen to what Arunie has to say about the origins of burnout and how to deal with it.
Burnout is more likely to happen in the workplace when you expect too much of yourself and you feel like your work is not good enough. So you maybe have imposter syndrome or complex. You're feeling inadequate. You're feeling unappreciated. and you're maybe in a job that's not a good fit for you. And I focused a lot about control and empowerment with my clients because that's what it kind of comes down to. There's another area though, right? If we think about even Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom of the pyramid is the physiological sense. So that's your food, your water, your rest, your warmth, and the second one is safety and security. So if you're in that situation and maybe you're not at a financial place where you can move up and focus on other areas, you have to kind of just stay in that situation because you need to pay your bills and you can't switch right now. That's the case for a lot of people. So what I would say is if that's happening, that's the part of you that accepts that, okay, this is my job for now. I hate it. That's okay, but I get a paycheck. But there's power in saying like, I hate this job and I'm going to work my 9 to 5, and at 5 o'clock, I'm clocking out and focusing my energy on other things. So don't feel like you're stuck. Set those boundaries. If your workplace is taking advantage of you and you're working overtime without getting paid, that's something that you need to set a boundary on and focus that energy on making your resume better or, going to the gym or whatever else you want. Like take control back in your day where you can, because it's true. Not all of us can just quit our jobs and start making $1 million the next day, right? I wish we could all do that. But if you can't, then you have to find control where you have to take the control where you can find it in your life.
Now, key takeaway from this episode with Arunie was that you can gain control of your life back by focusing on things that bring you joy. But we can all agree that sometimes we just have to do things that might not bring us 100% joy, such as doing dishes, doing laundry, buying groceries. And as women, we tend to take more duties like that in our households. And so one of the most intriguing and thought-provoking episodes of season 2 was my conversation with Lindsay Sparrow about the invisible tax of household chores on women's careers and finances. This was the most listened and shared episode in season 2, and I can honestly see why. Lindsay, as a certified financial planner and certified divorce financial analyst, did not only share why women take on such a disproportionate share of household chores, but she also explained and shared insights into how we women can value our time more. Here's a clip from that episode.
I think it is a complicated matter because old habits die hard. And I think what happens in relationships all the time is tit for tat. I did this. No, you did that. No, I did this extra thing this week, right? That's what it turns into. And I think I love stemming from, I think first women have to decide, how much am I worth an hour? So as an example, if I'm valuing my time at $250 an hour, but I can hire a cleaner at $25 or $35 an hour, why am I not doing that? And women have this really hard time deciding to hire a cleaner because it's almost like they put a lot of value or there's something attached there that's not allowing them to give that up. But it's really around, if you can make more money by having someone else do your grocery shopping, ordering your groceries online, whatever it is, these are just important things to think about. If there's something like, if you really love getting groceries, by all means, keep doing that. But as a couple, I think you can first talk about what are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish? Maybe that's financially, traveling. What do we want for our kids? And then I think you go from there because is it really critical that you do your own laundry? Is that going to get you to your goals? Or are there other solutions? And I think starting from a place of what do you like doing around the house? Because there are some jobs that we are okay with and are actually maybe enjoy. And then there's other things that we just hate. So which your partner might actually really like. So I think it starts from there. No one wants to do any of this crap. Let's first say that. But it has to get done, right? We all have to eventually wash our sheets and eventually grocery shop. We can't just skip the dishes forever.
While Lindsay briefly touched on the topic of money in relationships, we had a separate episode in season 2 dedicated just to that. I mean, it's hard to talk about money with yourself. We just discussed that. But it's even harder to have this conversation that is so intimate with your partner. Oftentimes, it results in arguments, in misunderstandings, And our episode with Stephanie Wolfe, certified financial counselor, called How to Get Financially Naked with Your Partner, was just about that. How to have a conversation with your other half about money. It was hard for me to pick just one snippet of this episode, but there was a personal story that Stephanie shared with us that really stood out to me. And I think it talks quite a bit about the importance of having a conversation with your partner about money and the division of it in the family early on. So here it is.
It's so important to have like a fluid conversation around money. And if two people, it's so funny. They always say, oh, there's a spender in a marriage or in a relationship and there's a saver. That's not always the case. But, people are never going to match completely on what their thoughts and feelings are around money. So it's one of those things that you just have to always try to understand the other person's position and really have some open conversations. Now, if somebody is in like a lot of debt, like we were talking about at the beginning, where, she was they're gonna buy a house together and she's like, whoa, how are we going to actually do this? I'm not sure I want this anymore. You need to be prepared. And, actually, I do have a story. I have another client that just came to mind right now who I did work with, and, it's not a happy ending, but, it was necessary, and it took us a little while to get there, but she had accumulated a lot of debt. And when we unpacked why she had this debt, it was actually a result of her spouse. And so she was constantly swooping in to cover him in certain situations. And he had also taken out some loans with her money, like with her name as well. So they are no longer married. So what I will say, and she was left with a big pile of debt that she has had to work aggressively to pay off. But there was a lot of discussions and learnings, I guess you could say, that came out of that conversation, and things that she knows that she would do differently. And one of them was just knowing sooner that he was really horrible at spending money. I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but it's just that client holds a special spot in my heart because of what she had to go through, and the the realization that the relationship wasn't actually going to work and that it wasn't serving her anymore. And so very difficult, but having those conversations early on is so important.
I mean, such an eye-opening story. And I'm sharing it not to scare anyone off, but to really emphasize the importance of paying attention to different signs that you see from your partner in their behavior and having that conversation early on, as we mentioned. But what if you are in a situation where your significant other isn't the only person you need to talk about money with? How about your parents? This is a whole different conversation. And I mean, there can be many instances on why you might want to do it. In season 2, I had a conversation with Leanne Kaufman, president and CEO of RBC Royal Trust, and we talked with her about caregiving for our aging parents. Leanne mentioned in that episode that caregiving is still predominantly a women's issue, and we are affected disproportionately by it. As women, we are expected to take on caregiving responsibilities if our loved one gets sick, if it's an elderly parent that gets sick, and we do not have financial means to hire someone from the outside to help us. This episode, that was called The Cost of Caregiving for Aging Parents, was centered around preventative measures, which are often overlooked. I mean, we don't normally have a conversation with our family deciding what happens if you get sick. We only start talking about it once we get there. And in this episode, Leanne helped us understand how to prepare for such conversation, how to have it early on, so that in case that emergency does happen, you are already well equipped and know what to do. So here's a snippet from that episode.
It's so tricky, and it's not a common conversation, right? It's not something that comes up at most people's dinner tables. But I think taking advantage of either a story of a family member or friend that you've been made aware of, or maybe even something like listening to this podcast, and then taking it back to have a conversation with your loved one to say, I was listening to this, and I had no idea, Mom, Dad. Did you have any idea how expensive it is to get someone to come in? I heard it was $35 an hour and that retirement homes are this much. And have you thought about that? Have you talked to your financial people about that? What does that look like for you? What would you want to have done? And use it as a bit of a gateway to have that conversation. And, you can make it about you, right? You can make it about, I'm worried about this. And then it might make it easier to get the older generation talking.
To wrap the financial well-being topic of season 2, I want to share one final episode that is related to actual women's health. I'm not a doctor, though I come from a family of doctors, but I do understand the importance of women's health and taking care of it. In season 2, I was especially proud of my conversation with the founder of Rhea Health, Dallas Barnes, where we talked about the cost of wrong birth control on women's health and finances. Dallas shared quite a few fascinating facts about birth control, which many of us take to protect from unwanted pregnancies. As someone who has been through the journey of trying to find the right birth control that works for me by trial and error, I can relate to so many things that Dallas shared. Here is a snippet from this episode, and if you're someone who is looking to start taking birth control or who currently is on birth control and isn't satisfied with how it's working for you, don't settle for it. Listen to this episode and seek alternative options.
What we found was that 50% of people who use birth control reported side effects, and even more so. We know that not only the physical side effects, but there's also emotional and mental side effects that people experience. And so even further than that, we found that 75% of people who use contraceptives describe their experience negatively. And even, just the time that it takes for somebody to go through this process of trying to find a birth control option that they like, it's very trial and error. It's often seen as a one-size-fits-all approach. And so with that, people on average are spending 2 years to find an option that they like. That is way too long, in my opinion. We spend nearly $1,000 on options that do not work for us. I could go on and on and on about how the system really is not built for the people that it's intending to serve.
Moving on, let's now talk about all things career, making money, starting a business. This was a new theme of episodes I brought into season 2, and I'm so glad I did because the caliber of guest speakers who joined us was just wow. As someone who has transitioned careers myself from being in corporate world to starting my own company, I was super passionate about each of these conversations, and many of them felt like a casual chat with a girlfriend sharing our lessons learned. Whether you're working 9 to 5 now or want to grow your career within one company or potentially by moving to a different company, whether you are self-employed or are looking to build your own company, listen carefully because each of these episodes has so many golden nuggets of information that I wish I personally knew sooner. So let's start from a point where you are working for a company and are building a career in corporate world. When I think about my time working a 9 to 5, one of the things I wish I understood better was my employee benefits. In the episode, How to Maximize Your Employee Benefits with Katrina Sinclair, Vice President of Business Development at Davis Benefits, a company that helps businesses create and offer workplace benefit packages to people like us. That episode was a true gem because Katrina was able to break down the different types of employee benefits, how they are differentiated, how they work. And one snippet that I wanted to share with you today is about the must-offer benefits and some of the nice-to-offer benefits that you can negotiate. So here it is.
Yeah, and one thing I'll make note of too is one thing you can negotiate is your benefits to start on day one. You're starting with a new company. Typically, there's that 3-month probation period to say, oh, are you going to work out? And the benefits typically follow that 3-month because the employer's written it into the insurance contract. But what they don't say is it is up for negotiation. So you can negotiate that your benefits start day one, not the day after your 3-month probation. And this can be an added value for you because then you don't have a gap in coverage. Because if you do need dental work or a massage or things like that after a week or two with the company, you have those benefits in place compared to waiting those 3 months. So that can be a good negotiating point when you're going kind of back and forth with dotting the I's and crossing the T's of what that perfect offer looks like.
Now, all of this is good to know if you're just looking to start employment or potentially looking to negotiate your benefits and compensation package. And talking about negotiations, in order for it to be successful, you must prepare for it. That's something that we talked about in one of the recent episodes of In Her Wallet podcast with Olessia Lapina called The Power of Personal Brand in Your Career Growth. Olessia and I talked quite a bit about communicating the unique value you bring to the table when negotiating salaries, compensation, titles, and so much more. While there were so many different insights shared in this episode, this one was one of my favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that I always recommend for people to do is have a running file of all of your achievements and projects. I just think it's incredibly important to have almost like a database of what you've done, how you've done it, and the impact that you've made on the bottom line of a company. You know, this is all information that you can bring into a new role if you're negotiating your contract, you know, and you know that they're working on a specific project. You can always say, you know, I'm looking for a 10% increase because I anticipate through this, and this, when I start my new role, I'm going to increase your revenue by 15%, right? So if you know what you're capable of, if you understand your value and you understand what you've done in the past, it's going to be a lot easier to have that conversation.
Next up, let's talk about actual negotiations. This is a serious topic, and for that reason, I brought in real experts, Jillian Klein and Sophie Warwick, who are the founders of The Thoughtful Co. We had a conversation with them about negotiating workplace benefits, specifically post-pandemic, because so much has changed in how we work since then. Girls shared many great insights, but my favorite was opening our eyes on the fact that it's not only the salaries that we can negotiate, but other things too. Listen to this clip and make sure to check out the full episode for actual things to say to your employer or manager when you're negotiating.
You know, the vast majority of our clients come to us and really just want to negotiate their base salary. And that's fair because salary, you know, impacts our life so much, it helps us pay for expenses, all these things. But really, there are so many other components that you can negotiate that really can positively impact both your wealth and your enjoyment of work. The two biggest pieces for me that I'm really passionate about helping women better understand and then enable them to negotiate is one, bonus structure. And these usually aren't super complex, but you know, when you get an offer, often it doesn't give you a lot of detail on the bonus structure. So asking questions of how it works, what the performance period is, when it actually gets paid out, what performance components are in there and what are they based off of, gives you a really solid kind of baseline to then negotiate that bonus. And we support clients with negotiating a lot of sign-on bonuses and things like that. So that's something really important to think about. And then the really big one for me is equity compensation. So stock options, RSUs, PSUs, share appreciation rights, carry programs, lots of different types. And equity compensation is super complex. It's not intuitive. I've been doing this for 9 years now, and sometimes there's still programs that I'm like, I don't understand how that works. And it's really not well explained. So it's kind of this black box. And especially as you get more senior in your career and get to, maybe a junior executive level, or, even if you're at a startup or a technology firm, a lot of your compensation often is made up of equity comp. So it's this huge piece that is not well understood, but has a really big impact on our wealth. And so few people are negotiating it. And just from my perspective, there's so much room for negotiation. I've definitely seen that throughout my career. So that's the biggest piece for me, and really, educating people on how it works, and then knowing that you can negotiate it, and it's often flexible.
So far, we've been talking about positive scenarios where you are in control of your employment. But reality is, in the last couple of years, it hasn't really been like that. Many of us have experienced layoffs and uncertainty. This time can be challenging because we don't normally think about the things that we need to do in case we lose a job, though some of the things, the actions that we need to take, are very timely and need to be done in a timely manner in order to secure them, such as the government financial aid and support if you lose your employment. My episode with Erin Brandt, employment lawyer and the founder of Porta Law, was about what to immediately do when navigating loss of employment. In this episode, we talked about 3 scenarios: getting laid off, being dismissed, and getting fired. To better understand the difference between 3 of these scenarios, I highly suggest listening to a full episode. But the clip I want to share with you today is about the actual steps one should take when navigating loss of employment for either reason. Here you go.
So if an employee has received a letter that they're being asked to sign, they should read it carefully. They should figure out if the letter is actually lawful. The letter may include things that are or are not true under the law. An employee should make sure that they're not signing away any rights that they might have. An employee can call the employment standards branch in the province where they live to find out more information about how the employment standards branch deals with temporary layoffs. And an employee could also consult with an employment lawyer if they have questions that are really specific to their situation and are more complex than what's covered under the Employment Standards Act. So the Employment Standards Branch is a really great resource. They have helplines that are free to call, but I just want to caution that they're not lawyers. They can't give legal advice.
Now let's switch gears up and talk about your own decision to leave a company, whether that's to go work for a different place or to pursue your hobby full-time, or potentially to build a startup, as in the case with my next guest, Liza Akhvledziani, who is the founder of Chexi. Liza is my close friend in real life and someone who went from being an international student to raising over $1 million for her company Chexi. She walks us through that journey in detail, and there are so many takeaways in this episode alone. But what I want to share with you today is Liza's take on how to financially prepare to leave a stable paying job for a startup. Here's the clip.
For sure. And I think that is very key, to be ready and to be in the right stage of your life, both, emotionally and personally, as well as financially. It is a massive risk when you go into entrepreneurship, especially if, like you, for 5 years before, you were collecting a very good paycheck and had all the, benefits and vacation time, and life is pretty good. I think one of the things that people often overlook is, like, it's very easy for me to say, oh, you should just give it a try, really do it, pursue your passion. But ultimately, you have to take a step back and think about whether you are ready. For me, what that looks like is, number one, like you mentioned, the emergency fund you have. I would say you want to comfortably have 12 months. If you have more, that's great. And it doesn't have to be 12 months at a lifestyle that you're currently living, but it should be 12 months at a lifestyle you're comfortable with. So maybe you're not going to Aritzia every month anymore. Maybe you're not going on vacation 3 times a year, but you can comfortably pay your rent. You can comfortably, pay for your groceries, all the necessary living expenses. And I would say you want to have some money to also spend some time with your friends. Maybe it's not as lavish as it used to be, but if you're, month to month, just spending money on necessities and working on something incredibly stressful, you'll burn out really fast. So on the financial side, I think it's that. And I think on a personal and an emotional side, being an entrepreneur is a constant roller coaster. I mean, you know that yourself. You've also left a very good job. And, I think having the right support system, whether it's your partner, whether it's your friends, whether it's you just looking at it like, what's the worst that can happen? I think I'm going to have fun. And even if it doesn't work, I know I'm going to learn a lot and I will be okay on the other end. Being in a position in your life where you have confidence that no matter what happens, you will be fine, whether it's finding another job, whether it works out, whether it's something else, you will be okay. I think being in that emotional state is incredibly important because you will be hearing no every day, every week, and that will continue probably until you reach some sort of like a Series B, Series C stage. And you have to be very comfortable with that.
Besides Lisa, in season 2, I hosted quite a few other female founders, people who have gone from idea generation to product development to actually launching their product into the world and being oftentimes recognized in places such as Forbes 30 Under 30 list. And so the next clip that I want to share with you is actually with Lorin Winata, the founder of Melati Drinks, an alcohol-free aperitif startup that she had to launch during COVID in a country where she wasn't planning to launch originally because of the unforeseen circumstances with the pandemic. What stood out to me the most in this episode with Lorin was her take on the mindset that an entrepreneur has versus an employee has, and her lesson learned from hiring her first team. So here's a clip.
Absolutely. I mean, I think previously as an employee, you're never subject to that much responsibility. I think the biggest thing was when we started paying payroll, then you realize that you're actually responsible for providing for other people and their families. That's when the real stress kicks in. So, I think it's more of a mental game than anything else. Of course, you have to be smart and you have to be able to accept help from people who know much better from you. And there will be many people who know a lot more than you. And there'll be other people who will not know as much as you. And so I think more than anything else, it's a complete mental game that you play with yourself. And so you have to be able to set aside space for you to really process those things, and you have to stay strong. My philosophy is that I would never hire someone for something that I didn't have a baseline understanding of already, because if I just hire someone to do it, then what's 100 times growth of 0. You'll never understand what the baseline is for that. And so you don't understand how good of a job they're doing or what the potential could be for that element of things. So, I think in the beginning, my personal philosophy is that you kind of do have to understand everything on a basic level, but just have that there first before you have someone hopefully scale that element up.
Now, when we talk about starting a business, your initial thoughts might be, how do I name it? What logo should I have? How do I hire my first person? And so on. That is exactly how it was for me. But what changed my mindset was an episode with Staci Millard, who sold her company for over $1 million last year. The episode was called Lessons on Building Wealth After Selling a $1 million Business. And in that episode, Staci shared how to stop second-guessing your decisions, what activities to focus on to maximize profit. And the clip that I want to share with you is about how to start making money in your business fast. I love this episode. So here you go.
Because every business is so different, the very first thing I say is if you want to start a business, that vision casting is amazing to go through a one-page business plan. I cannot get on board with like a 20-page business plan and all the nonsense that goes
stresses me out when I think about it.
Yeah, but I have a great resource that's absolutely free, and it just walks you through some of the key points of what does differentiate you? How do you market to customers? What's the language you use? And then how do you make money? What is your model in business? And understanding then based if you're like, okay, I'm going to create a course. Well, then you can start asking yourself, like, how many of those courses do I need to sell? Oh, wow. If that's how many I have to sell, then how do I go about getting in front of enough people to do it? Where it's like, if you're fixing computers, like maybe you have 100 people that you already know. So using what you know and putting it kind of into on paper all of a sudden you start going like, oh, I didn't realize that. And like, oh, maybe this. And it just pulls so much information out of you that is the key to taking all the next steps, right? Just having that clarity is the most important thing.
To supplement your business operations, there are government grants available, but often it's a gray area that's hard to understand, and it's oftentimes hard to successfully secure such funding. Brianna Blaney, founder of Pocketed, a company that helps businesses secure grants and government funding, says that herself. Here's a clip from our episode titled How to Leverage Government Grants to Start and Grow Your Business that breaks the myth that you have to have a fully running business to secure funding. Here you go.
We see a number of trends. I would say there are, of course, lots of different stages of companies that use Pocketed, and you are able to access grants, tax credits, and incentives at all stages of your growth journey. That being said, the types of programs that make sense for your business and that you will be a best fit to access really do depend on the stage of your business. So for example, if you're an earlier stage company, perhaps you don't have someone on payroll yet, but you are generating some revenue and you're hoping to hire so you can grow your team and add resources to grow faster, do more, then you may be a really great fit to look at a program like Canada Digital Adoption Plan Stream 1, which is a $2,400 micro grant. You may also be a great fit to look at a hiring grant, which will subsidize wages for you to hire either students or youth when that program comes back later this year. And it's a great way for you to accelerate your growth as a company, even when you're early stage. The later stage you get, you can start accessing bigger programs that will fund market research or market expansion outside of Canada, research and development, innovation. And those programs can be substantial in the amount of money that they give you. And so really, we see people be successful on Pocketed at all stages of their growth. Of course, it just depends on what you're looking for and whether that is available at that moment in time. I wish we were magicians, but we're not. And I would say the biggest frustration we hear from founders and from entrepreneurs that use our platform, business owners, is I logged in and I didn't see exactly what I was hoping to find today. And we go, I hear you and it sucks. And such is the nature of government funding. While the government wants to support job creation and market expansion and innovation and all of those great activities that they're funding, they also don't necessarily adapt to your timelines. So that can be really frustrating when you're in a place where you need capital in your business and what you want doesn't exist in the perfect form today. So working with a grant specialist to help you get creative in the programs that are a fit, and not just the programs today, but the programs over the next 6 months to a year that would make sense for you to look at is really critical. So you can be planning proactively and not miss deadlines when those right fit programs do come available.
Moving on, one of my personal takeaways from season 2 was an episode with Jami Monte, CPA, called 3 Steps to Build a Strong Financial Foundation as an Entrepreneur. We recorded it in the summer after I filed my first corporate tax return, and oh man, did I wish I met Jami sooner. Though I'm licensed in the investment space and know a thing or two about personal finance, corporate finance and accounting is a whole new world for me, and Jami was able to so easily digest such concepts as bookkeeping and tax write-offs for me. It was hard to choose one takeaway from this episode, but my biggest learning was around incorporating a business. So here you go.
So when you incorporate your business, like you said earlier, you have a new entity. You go from filing one tax return for you personally to now you have a personal and a corporate tax return. And so actually I like to use this analogy of like having a baby. Okay. So I feel like you liked this analogy when I used it last time. So we'll bring it back here. So when you're, say you're a sole proprietor and you have a business, it's kind of like you're pregnant because that business is still like tied to you personally. And like, it's like when you file your taxes, it's for you only. But the business still exists. It's just like a part of you. Then when you have the baby, think the baby grows up, the baby's separate from you. All of a sudden, now the baby's off to university. Okay. And now they're filing their own tax return. They're still tied to you because, you know, they're still your kid and you're still somewhat liable for them. They're not like fully a grown-up adult, but you're still kind of overseeing them and making sure they're not getting into trouble. And so that's what happens when you incorporate. The incorporation is kind of like the kid going off to university. You're still overseeing them. You're still responsible for their finances, but they're gonna, well, you're responsible to oversee, but they're gonna file their own tax return that's separate from you. And when you're a sole proprietor, then it's like the business is a part of you, so it's one single return. So what happens is on the tax front, the corporate tax rate is lower than your personal tax rate usually. So if you do incorporate your business, then, and you don't use the money from the business, then you get to take advantage of that lower tax rate. Kind of like how university students have lower tax rates, actually, when you think about it. Usually, the starving student, they got the lower rate. Parents are trying to take their university credits and claim them on their own returns, So yeah, that's how I would look at it in terms of the corporation. You've created a separate entity. It's completely living separately from you, but you still got to file. And now you have two filings, but one of them, is going to be taxed at a lower rate. And if you can just leave all the money in it, then that's going to be beneficial for you. Once you pay yourself, then you now trigger personal tax on that money too.
There are just 2 clips to share in the business and career section before we move to all things wealth and investing. But these 2 are real gems. They are both solo female founders building products that are for us women. I'm a big fan of both of this. I talk about them quite often, and chances are you already know who I'm talking about. First, let me share my episode with Olivia Lovenmark, founder of Duchess Cocktails, which we, by the way, drank during our recording. You can see that on YouTube. Olivia is yet another female founder who not only persevered during COVID pandemic, but also bootstrapped her cocktail brand to 10x growth in just 6 months. When I asked Olivia for advice to women building a business, here's what she had to say.
So I don't think it's easy. I think is the first thing. I think that there's a lot of naysayers who are like, oh, it's a lot. Like, how are you going to manage that? I think that the time is, for me, I've always sort of felt like, the time's going to pass anyway, and this is hard, but I would really like this to exist. So I'm going to push forward at my own pace. And I think that would be my advice, is that it doesn't need to happen for tomorrow. You don't need to launch your product next month. You don't even need to launch it in 6 months. I mean, you can, and that's great, but just take the pressure off yourself. I think one thing that I've learned over the past 2 years is that I sort of say it as like timing is a thing. And if you are burnt out and you need a break, take the break. The break is valuable. Give your brain that rest and come back to it. Don't leave it forever, but come back to it when you're able. It took 1.5 years to bring our product to market. And to me, that felt like way too long. There would be weeks, months at a time where I didn't do anything, where I was waiting for someone to get back to me and they were taking ages. And I think it's just important to understand that like things are never built overnight. Seems like they are, but they're not. They're years in the making. And so just give yourself the grace and the patience and time to build it at the pace that's healthy for you, because you don't want to burn out and just not be able to pursue it.
Power is in simplicity, and to be honest with you, whenever I feel overwhelmed in my own journey, I try to remember these words by Olivia to ground myself. There is one more habit that I incorporated into my daily routine thanks to Kristine Locker, the founder of Locker, an online extension and app that allows you to save your favorite items during shopping. Kristine's episode actually opened season 2 of In Her Wallet podcast, and I truly recommend going back to listen to the full story of hers. She did it all. She worked a 9-to-5, then had a commission-based job, saved a lot of money by living below her means, had a problem during shopping that she wanted to solve. She didn't have the technical skills, so she found someone to help her build it. She raised over $1.5 million for Locker. And so during our conversation, Kristine didn't hold anything back when sharing her story. Forbes named Kristine next 1,000 entrepreneurs shaping the future of America. And when I asked Kristine what's her secret to being a solo founder, here's what she said.
I've definitely mastered being a solo founder. I think there are so many pros and cons to it, but ultimately it is the ability to schedule your day in a way that serves how you function best. So I schedule my morning with my most intense focus needing meetings where I can give my best effort. That's where I do my hardest work. Then my afternoons I keep for maybe more creative things, or the design hat that I need, or the content hat that I need to wear. And so that's how I'm able to wear multiple hats in a day. I think the other thing is when you go into it being a solo founder, you just know that you're going to have to teach yourself so many things, whether it's in a day, in a week, in a month. And you have to, one, be super hungry to learn all the time. I love learning. I am a forever student. And you have to be really humble. Admitting that you don't know, admitting that you need someone's help is the first step. I need help all the time, every single day. I'm like, somebody an expert at this who can guide me better than I can do it myself. And so I think if you're open to learning and you're willing to ask for help, you can truly do anything.
And now, finally, let's talk about your money. This season, we created a variety of content on personal finance, from how to be the boss of your own money to how to invest with confidence. I did a solo episode in season 2 where I talked about the importance of being careful with who you take investment and money advice from. It's called How to Not Get Influenced with Bad Money Advice. And I'm so proud to say that every person who's been on the In Her Wallet podcast thus far and talked about investing was a licensed industry professional, has experience, and was not in any way financially compensated for the information shared. Every episode that we created that was centered around investing was truly just pure value and education for you to feel capable and supported in your money journey. And so the first clip that I want to share with you in this section is my conversation with Michelle Robertson, aka Miss Money and Math. Michelle is a chartered professional accountant, and we talked with her about math and numbers anxiety and how that can affect your personal finances. I find that for us women, we are oftentimes really good at saving our money, but when it comes to investing, we're afraid to make a mistake, to lose money. And here's what Michelle had to say about this.
If you just think about, money as and planning for your future and understanding, like making these goals with yourself, that is really, and making decisions every day about money, that is really not math. Right? That is choice. That's aligning with your values. And I think if you couple that, if you try to see the non-math in money, right? Besides, these bills and what they amount to, you can really push that forward in terms of like really growing and learning more and staying curious and seeing all of the, personal finance is a huge area. I'm learning still every day certain things, right? And I'm an expert, but there's always, and our lives are constantly changing. And so our finances will change with that. And so I think it's really about being curious. I think when people have knowledge, you don't have to be good with math to be good with your money, kind of thing, and be planning for your future, right? You might need to sit down and be like, what's my take home every month? And if I want to do 25% of my take home to plan for my future, that's not a hard calculation. And you can pull out your calculator in the privacy of your own home. And, that's a practice. That's not math.
Once you're over the numbers anxiety, the next question that can pop up in your head is, where do I even start with building wealth? And as always, I didn't just bring anyone to answer this question. It was Scheherazade Hasan, who is a senior portfolio manager at Wealthsimple, one of Canada's premier investment management companies for people like you and me. One of the comments that we received on this episode said, "This episode is universally important, and it's the start of the foundation that everyone needs. Some of the episodes only appeal to certain people, but everyone needs this one." This comment that we received from our audience put me over the moon because it was truly the testament to the value that was shared in this conversation with Scheherazade. Here's a clip of the best takeaway in my opinion, but I truly believe that you should go back and listen to the full version.
The first thing I recommend doing is starting off by paying your high interest debt. So any high interest debt that you're carrying, like credit card debt, is usually very high, high interest. That interest can really add up over time. So it's important to pay it off quickly. But then you'll want to establish an emergency fund so that if anything comes up, you don't need to take on more debt to cover that emergency. But instead, you've got a pool of savings that you can really easily dip into. A really helpful rule of thumb is to set aside enough to cover like 3 to 6 months of your expenses. Once you've done those, see if your employer offers a matching program for your retirement savings. Make sure that you're kind of maximizing that and not leaving any money on the table. But, once you're covered in those areas, then start thinking about your financial goals. Is there a purchase you want to make? Are you saving for your own retirement or financial freedom? Establishing goals makes it so much easier to know exactly how to get your money to work for you.
The next fitting episode in your money journey, after the roadmap that Scheherazade just shared with us is in place, would be to get your money working for you. And we do that by investing. In episode 39 of In Her Wallet podcast, I was joined by Lyndell Grey, who is a senior portfolio manager and investment advisor at RBC Dominion Securities, to talk about how to build an all-weather investment portfolio. Lyndell helped us understand how to choose companies to invest in, and that was my biggest takeaway from this episode. Here's a clip.
I always think go to a company that you're going to consume it as an individual person. So look for companies like consumer staples, financials, utilities. If you're going to use it as an individual when your own cash flow tightens up, chances are many investors are of the same opinion and they're looking to invest their money in the same way. Generally, if you're looking at more mature companies, so in Canada, like a blue chip company, you're probably fairly safe with the type of dividend distribution, but keeping in mind it might be reduced.
There was another episode in season 2 of In Her Wallet podcast that was centered around investing, specifically how to invest confidently as a woman in all market conditions with Simran Kang. Simran's company, MyFo, was also recently featured in Forbes, and she's the leader in the North American family office space. While Simran talked about how to invest with confidence both when just starting out and during volatile market conditions, what was most memorable to me from this episode was a lesson that she shared with us that she gave to her little sister about banking. So here's the clip.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a little sister who is like kind of going through all that right now. Like she recently graduated from school, so she's got student debt, and then she's like, do I do my TFSA? Do I do my RRSP? Or do I invest my money? So generally, there's a lot of factors that impact what you're going to implement as your strategy, right? And so like right now, you're in a rising interest rate market. So if you've got student debt, in the past, it was maybe better to save and invest because you were borrowing at such a low rate. But now it might be better for you to pay off your debt and then focus on investing and saving in the future, right? Again, housing used to be easier and more attainable, and it depends on what city you're in, right? Like mortgage rates have gone through the roof. So it might not be the right time for you to buy a property. That's still a little bit volatile out there. People don't really know when it's going to stabilize. So there's a lot of factors. And again, you kind of have to sit with somebody to understand, like, hey, what are my risks that I'm dealing with? And you just have to be careful, because generally, if you go to a institution, like I actually tell people to talk to their accountant, because their accountant doesn't actually get paid based on what decision you make. Whereas you go to an institution or a bank, they're like, I want you to keep your interest bearing loan because I'm making money off the interest. But then I also want you to invest because I'm making money on the investment. So I remember, like, even when my sister went, like, she came out with like a GIC that was giving her a lower return than the interest on her loan. And I was like, that's not what you want to do, because you're actually losing money. And the only person making money on this is the bank. So I was like, you don't need that. You should pay this off. And then you're making, just start saving monthly. So those are some of the things that you have to kind of like balance. And it depends on the current economic situation as well.
While Simran recommends talking to an accountant or someone unbiased when it comes to choosing an investment product, my next guest speaker relied on no one when building her investment portfolio. Why? She says it happened naturally once she discovered the power of real estate investing. Victoria Cluney has 18 years of experience in real estate investing, and in our episode, we talked about the foundations that you need to understand if you decide to go that route. While I personally believe that any investment portfolio should be well diversified with different asset classes from stocks to bonds and potentially some alternative investment products like real estate, there is really no right or wrong way of doing investing. That is one of the main reasons why we call personal finance personal, is because you get to choose what you want to do with your money. And so if you're someone who wants to dive head first and learn all things about real estate investing, I definitely recommend checking out this episode with Victoria. And here's the clip that I want to share with you that I believe was the best takeaway from this episode.
So I love that, because it's all about, clarity, which is your own personal assessment, and then knowledge, the tactical knowledge that you need in order to take the action, and then the confidence to be able to do it. And so from that tactical knowledge perspective, I teach a framework that I love, because I'll break that down because it's really kind of walk you through those steps. So it's called PROFIT. It's P for personal assessment. R would be for run the numbers. So that's the next phase that you need to understand how to run the numbers in order to identify, is this even a good deal? People put, let's say it's a duplex, just to keep it simple. A duplex is on the market and somebody is asking $800,000 for this duplex. Depending on where you are, that can be quite common. Well, if they're only making maybe $1,000 a month each side, and the interest rates are at 7.7, then you have to know that that is not going to be a good deal. So you want to understand what that looks like to run the numbers. I use calculators at this stage because I can plug in to everything I need and then it shoots it out for me. And so it's really just getting familiar with expenses, the revenue that comes in, the mortgage, and then anything else that you should be keeping aside for those rainy days that we talked about. So after you've done running the numbers, O would be for offer, like actually putting in an offer, where to find the property, negotiating terms that meet your needs, and then putting that offer on, hopefully getting accepted. And then we're moving into
F.
What is it? F. Thank you. Financing. So how are you going to even finance this property? Because not every property is financed the same. If you're doing a short-term rental, might be more challenging. In the long term, if you're going into commercial real estate, some people love commercial real estate. If you're buying units that are over 5, now it's considered commercial as well. You don't have to have like any retail in that. So there's a lot to it from the financing perspective. And just because one bank says no, it doesn't mean that the other is going to say the same. So knowing to keep pushing through and working all the angles that could be in order to finance that property, and even diving into private lending, getting private money. I financed a property within 4 days once, like from actual, like landed in my lap to close that property because of being able to use private funds. And that's just the beauty of it, is that once you get to that level, you can do it very quickly. The other one would be I think I'm on I now, FI, is the investigation. And what that means is, like, now your property is under contract, you're going through the financing process, but you also need to investigate the property, because just because the seller tells you that this is the revenue, this is the condition of the property, you can't take that at face value. So you want to investigate it. You want to see what the actual numbers look like. You want to look at the lease agreements. You want to have a home inspection completed by a professional who is, unbiased, to be able to tell you. So there's a lot of things to the due diligence. And then if everything is good to go, the last is the T, and that's just about building your team. So who do you need in your team? A real estate lawyer. You need a realtor if you're working with realtors. You have to have home inspectors, appraisers, property managers, contractors. How do you build those teams so that you can be successful? And so that's how we've packaged it up, is just to make it from like A to Z in real estate investing from start to finish.
And finally, with career, investing, home ownership, motherhood, all the roles that we women take on in our lives, there should be some form of protection in place for the unforeseeable. My episode with Cove advisors Nikki and Shauna, licensed insurance agents, was a success because I think we demystified what insurance is and who needs it. This episode was split into 3 different parts, and we talked about insurance for homeowners, for business owners, and for mothers. While I would love to share takeaways from each 3 of these parts, I'll leave it up to you to listen to the full version. But here I want to share a clip of what insurance is to give you a glimpse into that episode.
Yeah, of course. So insurance is a way to prepare oneself and family for when life doesn't go as planned. Because as we all know, life isn't always going 1, 2, 3 and how you foresee it going. So many people have this lifestyle that they've grown accustomed to, and they want to uphold that. They have a family that maybe their kids play sports or they go to expensive schools, and they want to be prepared for if anything were to go wrong. They've grown accustomed to that life. And you know what? They have other things to worry about. So this is just ticking off one of those worries, to have that freedom to not take up that financial worries in your brain.
Wow, we're almost there. So far, I've shared 24 key takeaways from season 2 of In Her Wallet podcast. If you're still here and you're still listening to me, I hope you're learning something new and perhaps added a few of these individual episodes to the list of your favorites to listen to during holiday season. December is my favorite time of the year. It's time to look back at the year that just passed, time to reflect on the things that you did well, something that you might want to change. It's also time to plan for the year ahead, the things you want to accomplish, the big and bold goals you set for yourself. I know some of us can get overwhelmed when thinking about future. And one of my favorite quotes says, most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. The cherry on top of season 2, and something that I personally believe is very timely to share, is our episode with Ashley Meadahl called Media Reset and How to Achieve Your Goals Before Year End. Ashley, who is a business coach, a top charting podcast host, and the founder of the Glow Getter Conference, shared this goal-setting tip that I've been using since our recording. It served me well, and I hope you incorporate it too. So here's the clip.
So my advice for anybody listening, if you have a big goal that you feel like maybe is a year down the road, multiple years, like 5-10 years down the road, first thing I want you to do is say this goal out loud. So even if it's just saying, I have a 1-day goal of blank. And then the next thing I want you to do is write it down and share it with somebody that is safe. It doesn't have to be, publicly on social media, even if it's, your mom, your best friend, your sister, your brother, it doesn't matter, your spouse, whoever. Share it with someone that's in a safe space of just saying it out loud. The third thing I want you to do is take some research, just go and do some research, spend some time and just see what it looks like to achieve that goal. Like, what is it going to take to get to that point? So for me, as an example, when I did the podcast, had that down, I had to figure out what those steps were to take it, what equipment I would need, what that would look like as a schedule, how often I would have to be creating, who I was going to interview, what the mission was. So a lot of details to that. Same with the conference. When I started looking at what those details were, again, Jenna was a one-day goal. And then I decided to say it out loud. I decided to write it down as a goal. And then I decided to approach and see what research I needed to do to learn, to understand, to make it happen.
That was it. I can't believe that I just shared 25 best takeaways from our guest episodes in season 2. Don't forget that besides guest episodes, In Her Wallet podcast is full of solo episodes where I share my knowledge on personal finance and investing with you. To close things off, I want to thank you for letting me be part of your 2023. I wish so that you have a wonderful holiday season with your loved ones, that you spend it creating wonderful memories, but also take the time to apply something new that you've learned this year to make your next year, 2024, even better. If In Her Wallet podcast made this year better for you, I would so appreciate if you took the time to leave us a star rating or a review, post about In Her Wallet on your story on Instagram, or maybe even send me a DM. I put my soul into creating content for you, and so hearing back is what really matters. With that, I'm going to say bye to you because season 3 of In Her Wallet podcast will air in early February of 2024. Happy holidays and Happy New Year.